Hi everyone, my name is Ellie Parker and I'm one of the LCI leadership group members and I'm going to be your moderator for the debate today. I'd like to welcome you to our 8th webinar presented on behalf of Lean Construction Ireland, the CCF, our Construction Client Forum, and the CAF, our Construction Academia Forum. Just some logistics as first. If you have a question, please type it in on the webinar. We'll consolidate those and ask them of Gerry and Brendan during the second half of the webinar, and any questions that we don't get answered during the session, we'll follow up with by email afterwards. So the agenda today will be as follows. You'll just get a 5-minute introduction from myself, a 30-minute presentation from Gerry Walsh of Mercury Engineering, and our special surprise guest, Brendan Malone of DPS. Gerry and Brendan actually worked on this presentation together and they've given it together in the past, so we decided that they would tag team you again today. And at the end, we'll follow up with about 20 minutes of Q&A. So, before we get started, I would really like to thank PM Group. They're the kind sponsors of all of our LCI webinars last year and this year. Our webinar today is called Direct Observation and DMAIC. I'm very much looking forward to hearing about that. And as I said today, our speakers are Gerry Walsh of Mercury and Brendan Malone of DPS. Gerry is a Mercury Engineering senior executive with 25 years of international experience in multinational and SME environments across the semiconductor, manufacturing, PV cell and marine industries. Gerry has a proven track record of successfully delivering extremely challenging projects. Brendan Malone of DPS is a senior manufacturing and industrial engineer with a wide range of experience developing and implementing lean initiatives and methods across multiple industries. And now I'm going to pass you over to Gerry and Brendan for their presentation on direct observation and DMAIC. And if you have any questions as we go along, please type them in as you go.
Thanks, Ellie. Hello everybody and welcome to our presentation. As Ellie said, I'm Gerry Walsh from Mercury and Brendan Malone is my colleague who we put this together some time ago, and we actually presented this at the LCI probably approximately 2 years ago, and we felt that it is worth going over the ground for people who haven't seen this before, well worth going through and opening it to a new audience. So please feel free to drop your questions into Ellie and we'll answer as many of them as we can at the end of the session. Just to tell you a little bit about the presentation before we get into it, as Ellie said, this is about direct observation and DMAIC. That's the define, measure, analyze, improve and control methodology. Some others have used a PDCA, a similar kind of cyclical model. And we're going to talk a little bit about how we use that in conjunction with direct observation and the kinds of improvements that we've seen in the past. So this is, for those of you who have not seen this before, this is based on our experiences during tool install at Intel back in 2014, 2015. And the numbers that you'll see further on are genuine improvements. We'll talk a little bit about how did we get to where we are, you know, why did we go down this path. You know, the direct observation in particular has a bit in terms of pros and cons. Brendan is going to talk to you a little bit about that end of it, and then we'll look at some of the results that we achieved and summarize for you if we can. Now, so our journey, why did we start off on this track of lean construction, direct observation using DMAIC and so on? Initially, I think if we're entirely honest with ourselves, it was customer demand. The customers, Intel in particular, but also Shell, Ericsson, Gerry, a bunch of our other clients they were pretty much insisting on it. The word has gotten around the industry that the construction, certainly the productivity improvements would not be in line with other industries, and surely there was something we could do. And in the cases of the likes of Shell as a good example, and some of the work with PPP in the UK, the clients very much just said, you know, you either show us your lean construction credentials or you won't be on the bid list. So that was our initial kind of kickoff point. That was our motivation for getting started. Very fortunately for us, we were very much in the middle of work with Intel at the time, and we were working to develop our own lean construction methodologies. So, you know, those range through things like BIM modeling, fabrication, delivery to site, having you know, predetermined ways of how you're going to do things, and doing it in a very structured and sensible fashion. So we developed all those means and methods as we went along, and of course then once you have your methods and means in place, practice makes perfect. You know, the more training you do, the better you get. The more practice you get, the better you get, and so on. So it's not just enough to have your means and methods. You do actually need to train your people on how to use them, and ensure that they continuously use them and get better over time. And then as time goes past, if you're using methods like DMAIC or PDCA and so on, you can continuously reinforce what you're doing and hopefully get better. So I normally ask people to consider this particular exercise that I'm putting in front of you here. It's a useful exercise if you have a chance to talk to your neighbor beside you, or you've seen it before. But what I'd like you to think about here is which of these two representations would you consider to be a better result? Now, we're not in a round table, so I'm not going to ask people to start discussing it at this point. But if I can just paraphrase the types of answers that I get in this exercise frequently, is, you know, on the top left, well, you know, the person shooting there is kind of all over the place, and you know, they're getting them all on the target, but you know, are they any good? Probably not. And there tends to be a favoritism for the one in the bottom left, where the thinkers among the audience will say, well, whoever's doing that is being pretty consistent about it, so I just need to figure out what it is that they're doing wrong, and I should be able to shift them en masse into one place. Well, those things may be true. The guy up in the top left could be actually quite good, but his machinery or his bow or whatever, it just doesn't have the controllability to hit the center of the target all the time. So these two representations are either equally good or equally bad. But the upshot of it is, if I'm a client and I'm trying to buy arrows that have been shot into the center of the target, I don't think I'd be too impressed with either of these. There isn't a single shot here that I'd be prepared to pay for. And as a result, there will be a great degree of rework, retraining, and so on. And that's going to cost somebody money. You know, either I need better equipment or I need different training for people or whatever. And really what we're about to talk about in the next number of slides is how do we make sure that we are actually hitting the center of the target, and that first time around, every time, that we're actually delivering to the client what they're looking for. Now, here's one of my favorite questions for those of you that work with different trade organizations, and that is how much of your labor time is, your direct labor in particular, how much of that time is actually value added? How much of the time that your people are out in the field are they doing things that are delivering value to you as a company? In other words, that they're making something, they're installing something, they're building something for which the client is actually willing to pay. Generally speaking, when I ask this question, depending on the company, I hear figures that are in the region of 60%, 80%, pretty high figures. And I'm sure the fact that you folks are listening to this particular webinar, you've probably heard that those figures are probably a little bit inflated. So I think the first thing that you need to really consider is, what does value added mean? Is my guy going to get his toolbox in the morning? Does that add value to what the client wants? And it probably isn't. If the person isn't installing pipe or pulling cable or actually laying bricks or pouring concrete, if they're not doing something that's truly adding value, then it's not value-added time. And at the end of the day, the client wants to buy a finished product. They want to buy a finished building or a finished process or whatever it turns out to be. It's kind of like going into your local Currys and saying, can I buy a computer? You want to buy the computer, you want to buy it finished, you want to buy it in one piece, and quite frankly, how much time and effort was spent to build it, you're not really that interested in. You're looking at what's the quality of the product you're buying and how much you're willing to pay for it, how much is it compared to another computer beside it. And that's the way our clients very much look at buying their buildings or the processes or the things that we build for them. They say, okay, who can build what I want at the lowest price at the quality that I need? So focusing on what is actual value added is really the core of where this whole discussion starts. And we're going to get back to that in just a moment. There are a wide variety of lean construction tools, and these are some of the more common ones, the ones that you'll probably have heard of quite frequently. Now the list goes on quite beyond this, but these are some of the more common ones. So looking for visible waste, and this is always a great place to start. What can I do to just look around and see where we're losing money? And doing waste walks, training your people to understand and identify the 8 kinds of wastes, and to walk around your sites or your offices and to note down what those are and to deal with those. That's a really great place to start. The 5 S's is also a very good tool to use in almost any environment. In project management, the last planner is really the foundation for ensuring that you've got a lean construction process. And for those of you who have seen single point lessons on big A1 or A2 charts around your work areas, those again are very useful tools when it comes to identifying visible waste. And I'm making a very clear distinction here between visible and invisible waste. Visible waste is the kind of waste you can walk around, you can see it, and you can deal with it. There is another kind of waste, and it really is, it's the next stage. If you've got your visible waste under control, then we can start to deal with the notion of invisible waste. And this does take a level of acceptance that you've already decided to take on the challenge of the lean construction journey, and you're committed to it, and you do want to tackle this. Now, I'm just going to give you a very quick example of invisible waste, and a very common one in our industry is we have a designer does a certain amount of design work on a piping system or a tool installation or so on, and then they have to send it to somebody for approval. And that approval loop may take 5 days, it may take 12 days. What it almost, only in very rare cases is it done straight away. And that necessarily introduces into the cycle delays, and those delays end up costing us money. We have to reshuffle our schedules, people have to work on one thing and then go and move on to something else while they wait for the replies and so on. And that waste is not waste that you can easily see. You have to do a level of analysis to understand and see that waste, and that's an example of invisible waste. Now, we have various methods of identifying and managing and eliminating, or reducing at least, invisible waste streams. DMAIC is the one that kind of applies to everything. The acronym stands for define, measure, analyze, improve, and control. So the define piece is to define in some detail what problem you think you see and what you're going to actually tackle. It's really important at this point to be very specific about the issue that you're going to tackle and define that well. Try not to preempt the solution in your definition. Just look at what is the problem you are out to address. After that, you're going to have to figure out how to measure it. Decide, is it really as bad as I thought it was? Is it worse than I thought it was? But a measurement method, because you really can't manage anything that you can't measure. So you have to figure out a measurement method for your particular situation. You then analyze the results that you get, decide on various methods of how you might improve it, check that you're actually improving with your continuous measurement, and then over time put that into some kind of control system. There's also value stream mapping, which I'm sure is spoken about elsewhere, and we're going to talk specifically, or more directly, Brendan is going to tell you a little bit about direct observation today. Now, just back to that piece about how productive do you think your people really are. Internally in Mercury, we did a survey of various different projects, and we did value stream, or not value stream analysis, we did value add analysis on various different projects, and those are a sample of the results that we got. This was probably about 3 years ago. The first project about 9 to 10%, the other two 14%. We did a range of others, but those are some samples, and those would have been in situations where we considered that the projects were doing reasonably well. We didn't pick particularly high performers, we didn't pick low performers, we picked middle of the range, and we felt like, speaking to supervisors, foremen, and so on, the numbers that they felt their people were doing were in the region of 60 to 80%, as I mentioned earlier. And to say that they were shocked when we produced the actual results probably underestimates the reaction quite a bit. And in fact, the cynicism that we hear from people when we show these numbers is very regular. It happens all the time, and it takes until we show people how it's happening that it takes quite a while for them to accept that those are the kinds of productivity levels that unanalyzed projects can expect to produce. And I would go further to say that if you don't have some kind of DMAIC or PDCA kind of process going on your particular projects, then it's reasonable to expect that those kinds of value add numbers are what are being achieved. Now those are pure value add. There's another section which is called necessary non-value added, which is a necessary part of the project, but you're still talking probably in excess of 60% of a person's time doing things which don't add value to the project and aren't facilitating adding value either. So those are just some numbers for you to think about at the moment. An equivalent study across the United States, as you can see, the number was consistently less than 20%, and consistently significantly less than 20% if we're entirely honest. So if you could hypothetically get yourself up to 35%, which is really the state of the art at the moment, we've come across occasional instances of people getting up to 40%, but if you can get your value added time up over 35%, you would very much be in the world-class arena. Your productivity would be 3x what it is today, or as I say, compared to an uncontrolled, unmeasured project. And I think anyone who's listening would agree that if you could improve your productivity by 3x, then you should be able to A, deliver it more quickly, and B, make a better margin on it. So as I said, if there are questions on that, please feel free to submit them, and we'll address that when we get to the end of the session. So the first two steps, I'm just going to talk about the first two steps, and then Brendan is going to take you on from there. And let me just, so why is it that Mercury and DPS are doing this presentation together? Well, the reality is, as I said, we were both working on a tool install project at Intel, and Intel made an offer to us that they would engage some of the services of DPS to assist us in going down the lean construction route, and we were very happy to accept that help. And in particular, Brendan was the person who joined us to look at direct observation, and it's largely due to his skill that we were able to make some of the improvements we did. So that's where that relationship started. So we defined the problem as we weren't achieving the optimum value-added output during tool install. And what we wanted to do was, if that was true, we needed to figure out how we were going to measure whether the assertion was correct or not. And in this case, we chose to use direct observation as the method of measurement. And on the screen there at the moment, you can see some of the breakdown. Now, this is a kind of typical report from a week. It's not overall over the project or anything. It's just at a point in time. And you can see the value-added section there on the left of the pie chart, and then the breakdown of all the other bits. And now, as I said earlier on, some of that non-value added is necessary. It's necessary to be able to actually get on and do value added work. But there's quite a bit of it that isn't necessary. You know, moving around, retrieving materials. Do you really need to spend that kind of time moving around? Yes, you need discussion. Do you need as much as we have? You know, rework clearly is a problem, right? We don't want rework and so on. So this is the kind of report that we got on a week-to-week basis. Okay, so with that, I'm going to hand you over to Brendan. And Brendan, as you want me to flip slides, please let me know.
Okay, Gerry. I'm going to kick off with just a very quick description of what direct observation is and what it is, how we actually use it, and how it may be useful to you in terms of driving improvements. There's an official definition there for direct observation. So a method of collecting evaluative information in which an observer watches a subject and all the rest through it. So effectively what direct observation is, you go and see. You go to Gemba and you actually look at the work that's taking place. You don't just stand watching it in terms of, you know, it's nice to watch what people are doing. You go and you look with a very, very critical mindset. What you're trying to figure out is the person doing the type of work that you need them to be doing? In other words, what your client or your customer is paying for? Or are they doing something else to enable that work? Or are they doing something which is completely unnecessary in terms of what the client wants to pay for? The type of method we use, you're evaluating a process. We're not actually looking at a person working. We're looking at the process that person is trying to follow in terms of how they do their work. So in other words, you're not looking at a person tightening a nut on a pipe. You're not looking at a person tightening a screw into a block connector. You're looking at how that person is enabled to do that work continuously and not to have to stop at it. The specific type of system we use is called overt structured direct observation. Overt means we tell everybody what we're doing, and structured because that returns standardized quantitative information. You can go and you can do a very quick walk around and have a look at what people are doing, but it doesn't give you a standardized quantitative report. Without standardization and without your quantitative report, it's very hard to measure when you make a change, have you actually made a difference? So that's why we use a very structured, standardized method of doing this. What direct observation does and how it fits in with your lean approach and your DMAIC problem-solving tool is it gives you a very good idea of what your current reality is. It actually measures your current reality, tells you exactly what's happening now, and identifies areas for improvement and enables measurement of subsequent improvements. The important bit to get here is that it tells you what your current reality is. You're not relying on what people tell you they think it is. You're not relying on what you believe it is or what it looks like from a process flow that you may have written up 6 months ago. You're actually seeing what's actually happening on the ground as it happens day after day after day. And that's the piece that really gives you the power to make an improvement, because you can improve any system you like on paper, but if you're not actually improving the reality of the system on the ground, you're never going to realize any of those improvements that you think you're making, because you're changing something that doesn't actually exist. Current reality is the place to be, and the best way to do that is to go to Gemba, look at the work that's happening, and figure out from there how you can make improvements. So if you want to just go to the next slide, Gerry, we'll continue. So a couple of hints and tips around how we actually use this type of a tool. Direct observation can be perceived as being difficult and causing problems. The first thing you need to do when you want to do direct observation is you need to talk to the people you're going to observe, and you need to make sure that they're aware of exactly what it is you're doing, how you're going to do it, what data you will be collecting, and how you will use that data. The main reason for this is a keystone of the lean approach to doing anything. You must have respect for the people, and you must treat them with utmost respect in terms of they're trying to do their job, you're trying to do yours. You make it very clear what it is you're going to do and how you're going to do it, and you show them what you're going to do with the information. We are not observing an individual. We never observe an individual when you're using direct observation. You look at a process. the whole emphasis of this system is to improve a process. You're not trying to make somebody work faster. What you're trying to do is make it easier for them to get their work done. And as we say in the slide there, you live by this. This is not just something that you think about. You specifically aim to observe your process, not the individual, and you always work on the process. This direct engagement, it gives you a couple of different things. You're actually on the floor looking at people doing the work. So whether it's out on a site, whether it's in a fit out on a particular building, or whether it's actually looking at something on a larger scale, you engage directly with the people doing the work. And you talk to them about what it is you're trying to achieve, and I would almost guarantee you that they will tell you how you can actually improve it in the simplest terms that are available out there, because generally speaking, the best person to improve a process or the best person to remove roadblocks are the people who are dealing with it day in, day out. And that's something that we have a huge amount of evidence to back up. Practically every change necessary would come about because somebody on the floor would say, this is the problem and this is actually the best way to fix it. What we would provide by using direct observation is, number one, you would give a measurement that would show what the impact of that is and what the improvement is after the change is made, and you also give a conduit to people to be able to bring those issues to the fore, because previously those issues would just stay hidden because nobody would be able to say what the actual impact is, and without an impact obviously it's very hard to get leverage behind any sort of a change to make an improvement if you don't know what it's costing you. So that direct engagement is a huge enabler as well, and it's something that's very important to maintain when you're actually working down with in a direct observation situation. So if we move on to the next one, Gerry. A couple of things that we consider quite important when you go in to do a direct observation. You've got to figure out what and when to observe. So you need to be very careful about how you actually structure your day and what it is you're going to actually look at. Typically, you can look at it from two different ways. You can look at a specific process in its entirety, or you can look at a specific area in its entirety. They're the two main approaches that you would make. To follow a full process, you could be moving from a different group of people every couple of hours or every couple of minutes, depending on what's happening with the task, or you can actually go in and work at a specific area in a specific task and follow that particular process from start to finish. The main thing in terms of what you're doing is when you go in to do the observations, be very consistent in what you do, be very consistent in how you measure it, and be very consistent in how you report it. You figure out up front what it is you want to document. How do you want to break out your information? What do you want to show people? What is it you're going to try and make a difference with? One of the things you may have noticed from the charts that Gerry showed earlier was the list of items that we would have there. We would have value added, which would be a standard one. And the grouping of all the wastes, as we would term them, are not necessarily matching up with the 7 wastes that you would hear of when people talk about lean, so the Tim Wood wastes. These are specific categories that we broke out that made sense to the people we were working with. So instead of talking about transportation, inventory, motion, we talked about things like time spent looking at a drawing, time moving to go from one place to another, time in discussion, trying to figure out what to do next on a particular task. So you can categorize those particular wastes to suit the area that you're working in and the people that you're working with, so they know exactly what it is that you're trying to improve and trying to reduce. Next couple of items we have here: discuss, categorize, and listen. So always discuss what you're doing with the people doing the work. They're the people who have the expertise. They're the experts in the area. I by no means consider myself an expert in construction or in trade work. I know what lean is and I know how a lean process works. And when I talk to the guys who are actually doing the work, that's when I can understand exactly where the waste is coming in. I can identify waste because I can see that they're not doing what it is we need them to be doing. They can then tell me how we can actually go and fix it. Categorizing your waste, as I said again, you can block that into any grouping that makes sense to you in terms of what you want to improve on. And in capitals, the biggest part of all of this job is listen. The best thing you can do when you go down to do direct observation is to listen to the people who are doing the work. They are the experts. They will have the solutions. Absolutely guaranteed. Every single time they will have the solutions to the problems. All you need to do is listen and actually get some traction behind getting it done. Identifying waste and identifying rework. Rework is a very specific type of waste because it effectively means you're not doing the job right first time. in terms of cost, it is extremely expensive. It's not just the fact that you have to redo the job, but generally speaking, there is an awful lot more ancillary work that needs to be done around it in order to make a correction to something that you've done already. There's all the ordering of extra materials, there's people having to go back in and remove the work that was done and then redo that particular piece of work. It's a very, very expensive way of spending your time. It is far better to get it right first time. Recommending simple improvements. So this is the cornerstone of direct observation and lean. We're not looking for complicated solutions to simple problems. We're not looking for complicated solutions to complicated problems. We're looking for very simple approaches and very simple fixes. These fixes tend to be the most effective ones to bring in because they're simple, they work, and it's very easy to change them if you haven't got a 100% correction the first time around. So look for the simple improvements. They're the ones that will give you very quick wins and will keep you on the right track. Last statement that's on this particular slide, I'm an expert at it. I can constantly state the obvious. Anytime I walk into an area where I see people working, I will state the obvious because it seems obvious to me, but it's not necessarily obvious to somebody else. I can walk in and say, well, why are you actually doing that? And the tradesperson may tell me, well, we do this and we do this and we do that. And then I can say, well, why would you actually follow a process like that? Because it doesn't make sense to me. And in the discussion, and through the actual explanation that they then give me, between us we can figure out, well actually, this is not an efficient way to do this particular task. We can come up with a better way to do it. And generally speaking, stating the obvious is a very strong way to approach most of that, because just because it's obvious doesn't mean it can't be fixed. So we go on another one there, please, Gerry. So this is just a general review of some of the items that we would have come across on that particular job on the Intel site with Mercury and DPS. One of the approaches we brought in here was to actually list out and try and prioritize particular fixes that we could bring in, which would give us very quick wins and very effective wins. Again, it's standard problem-solving approach that you would bring. You pick the highest Pareto items, work out why they're happening, and then you work out what your improvement can be and try and bring in corrections for all of those problems. There's a list there of items related to retrieving materials, just as one particular example. Retrieving materials is effectively time the trades guys would spend going looking for pipework, going looking for screws, looking for cush clamps, looking for whatever it was they were actually using on the day in the job. The very first item we have on that, work trolleys, material carts issued per pair, man with a van. That's the very simplest approach we could think of. So effectively, we brought the approach of every time the trades guy went in to do his work, he had to go find the parts he needed, bring them off to where he was working, and then do the job. And the actual comparison we used was with a guy calling to your house to do a bit of work in your house. If the tradesman arrives with his van, everything he needs is in his van. And what you really want when you're working on a site like this is not necessarily to have the van parked beside you, but have the equivalent. Have something beside you that has all your tools, all your equipment beside you, so you never leave the workplace. That's just one example of what we brought in as a change to try and improve things. There's a list of items there, from everything from moving materials around to actually moving particular areas, moving shared heavy-duty equipment closer to a work area, arranging them more sensibly in terms of, logically structuring it so you had cut shops and welders and drills closer to work areas. Excuse me. So they're just general sort of improvements that we brought in that would make a difference to an area when you did it. Again, there's nothing complicated in there, all very simple and all very straightforward. So with that, Gerry, I think it's back to you.
All righty. So over time, we continue to implement these, and as Brendan just said, a series of small improvements. We didn't try to make any dramatic improvement in one step. And as you can see from our measurements, there were highs and lows along the way. It wasn't as if things just got better overnight. We had some successes, we had some setbacks, but generally speaking, over time, the productivity improved. And in fact, by the time we got to the end of that project, our output was effectively 2x what it was at the time that we started the direct observation exercise. Now bear in mind we didn't start on the direct observation at the start of the project, so you know, there obviously were some organic improvements that occurred before we started into this, but by the time over the measured period, we got almost very close to twice the output that we had at the start of the measurement period. And the message that I'm trying to convey on this particular slide is keep measuring, keep trending. As you can see in the top left-hand side, each time we had a major dip in our output, we went and we had a look at why did that happen to us? Can we understand what set us back there? Because if we don't understand, first off, if we don't trend it, we can't see those kind of setbacks, and secondly, if we don't analyze them, we can't fix those setbacks. So really it's important to understand those. Also, when you hit these high points, like, you know, why was it we did so particularly brilliantly in a particular week? You know, in the bottom left-hand side, you can see we had a week there where we had a 100% right first time. So all the evac lines that went in that week, there was no rework on them, which is in stark contrast to a couple of weeks previously where we had 41% reworked, right? So keep measuring. If you don't measure, you can't manage. Or if you are managing, you know, you might consider it, was it just luck, or is there something particular about the way you manage that gives you a similar kind of insight? So just a summary on that then. Typically, you're not as efficient as you think you are. There will be those among the audience who know exactly how efficient they are, so I stand to be corrected, and I'm just saying typically. Direct observation is a very useful tool, but it needs to be used with caution, and it's more for the company that is already on the lean construction journey and has the mentality of lean construction embedded in its organization. I don't recommend that you use this as one of the first tools out of your toolbox of lean construction. It's for the more developed companies who have already taken on board a lot of the other techniques first. There have been companies, projects or parts of projects that have recorded a value added in around 35 to 40%, and that really is dramatic. We have seen it sporadically. I don't think we've ever seen it on a project as a whole. We've seen it in sections of projects, but it is achievable, and if you've got the culture and the determination, you can certainly improve your numbers. And let's be honest, even if you only improved your productivity by 30–40%, that would be significant, not to mention 2 or 3x. And that really concludes our presentation. So if we have questions, I guess now's the time.
Guys, that's great. Thank you very much for that insightful presentation. Let's have a look at the questions that we've got in. So Paul Ebbs was asking, what is the difference between DMAIC and PDCA, and what's the benefit of one over the other?
To be perfectly honest with you, I don't think that there's a real difference between the two. If I was to DMAIC, if you like, just adds a little bit more definition in the description. You know, the plan, do, check, act. You know, you create your plan, you do it, you check it, but the question is, how are you going to check it, and how are you going to act or adjust depending on how you use that acronym. the DMAIC really just introduces the term of measure to make sure that whether it's the Plan, Do, Check, Act or it's the DMAIC. I think DMAIC, just the acronym, is more descriptive. At least that's my own personal assessment of it.
Great, thank you. Paul also asked, I think it was Gerry mentioned 1,100 US projects, and he's wondering where the data was. Could that be referenced?
Yeah, I'll dig out the reference. I don't have it right now, but I will certainly dig it out. I'll have to go back to my own research material, but I'll dig it out and send it to you, Paul.
That's great, thank you. And one from Carl Burney. On a complex tool install project, such as the tool upgrade project at Intel, was it challenging trying to cut down on the number of meetings that people attended? I presume that many meetings equals a lot of waste. So thanks, Carl. Yeah, Intel is glad to admit that, yes, we probably have too many meetings at times. So how did you deal with things like that? How did you deal with stuff that's outside of the direct trade workflow, but also, you know, pulls away from you adding value yourself?
Well, there's a few parts to that. First off, on the contractor side of the house, you do have the opportunity to limit that quite a bit. You know, the folks who are doing their work, we want that's the people who are adding value as opposed to managers like myself. We keep their number of meetings to a minimum, you know, and a meeting in the morning for 10, 20 minutes, a meeting in the evening, 10, 20 minutes, and other than that, we try to keep them focused on the job, and that goes for the direct contractors, the foremen, the supervisors, and so on. The meetings with the clients, we try to focus that through a limited number of people. The more senior project managers, some of the engineers, some of the schedulers will certainly spend more of their time with a client like Intel, and that's okay. There has to be a communication path. So we make sure that we have just a limited number of people who are doing those kinds of interactions. It might seem like a lot, but when you're talking, you know, the size of projects that we do with Intel, the percentages are quite small. We've also shared our thoughts with Intel and other clients on how they structure themselves. We've worked with a lot of semiconductor companies, not just Intel, and they have different approaches and different staffing levels. So we've shared our experience of working with other clients, and it goes up and down. But the key, really, in my mind at least, on the contractor, designer, GC kind of side of the fence is really focus on the key number of people that you need to interact with the client, and basically have them do all the meetings and keep your people who are adding value doing exactly that. Keep them out in the field.
So it sounds like a plan. I know myself, at times I've just said, I'm not needed at this meeting, I'm not going to it, or I'll come in for the first 5 minutes, deal with, for example, document control issues, and then leave for the rest of the construction because it's a waste of my own time to be there. So I think, you know, you work it with your client, you work it with your team, and then there's also a bit of working it within yourself and standing up and saying no when you need to. Okay. Another question we have in from Niall Dillon. Does 2 times value add improvement equal 2 times productivity improvement in the field?
I'd like a little more. Let me say, hi Niall, how's it going? Just try to, does that mean 2 times? The short answer is yes, it does. I get twice as much product in place in the same length of time. It doesn't necessarily translate to twice as much margin. That really comes down to a lot of factors, including how many prelims you have on the job and the percentage of direct versus indirect. But in terms of straightforward number of meters of pipe installed, yes, it does. I hope that answers your question. Give me a shout later if it doesn't.
I thank you for that. We have another question in from Paul Ebbs, and I'm actually very interested in this one myself. So have any of the tradespeople been involved with collecting the direct observation data, or who were the people collecting it in the majority of cases you've worked on?
Brendan, do you want to take that one?
Yeah, I can take that, Gerry. Generally speaking, most of the DO data was collected by DPS people. That would have been a vast majority of information collected.
So in this case, that would have been construction management team you're talking on those projects?
Yeah.
Great.
So the direct observation team specifically would have collected that data. And that was directly with DPS. There were a small group of tradespeople from each of the trade partners on the site were trained up and did some initial data collection with direct observation, and they would have done a small amount of it through the project, but the vast majority would have been probably in excess of 80-90% would have been done by the DPS people.
Great. And Gerry, we had a response back from Niall Dillon. I believe you answered his question successfully. He says yes. So I'm going to go into our last question that we have at the moment, and if anyone else has one, please submit it in there soon. But another one that's interesting, what kind of difficulties have you come across in developing a direct observation environment, and what kind of lessons learned do you have from that?
Okay, well, I think if you don't mind, I'll give my opinions and then Brendan can give his. The first, and I think the biggest problem that I had to deal with was that the trades on the ground saw this as being a time and motion study. And there's a lot of negative connotations and feeling around that kind of environment. So I had to spend a very significant amount of time with supervisors, with foremen, actually going out in the field, talking with the trades themselves and saying, folks, I want you to understand what we're doing here. I want you to engage, and you know, it took quite a bit to convince them that I wasn't trying to, you know, crack the whip harder, right? That what we were trying to do was to find ways to make their lives easier, to make the process easier. So there was a lot of the softer side of management that had to be employed in the early phases. You know, it wasn't good enough to just say, we are going to do direct observation and we go out and do it. We really needed to make sure that the trades, the foremen, the supervisors, they were engaged, they were behind it, they understood what was going to happen, how it was going to happen, and very importantly, that they saw the results. It was important that we, you know, as quickly as possible, and time was a key factor. The example of the man with the van, the trolley with all the right tools and spare parts in it. It was key not only to implement that, but to implement it quickly, so that the folks that came up with those ideas could see that we were acting on what they were saying. They didn't want it to be another management speak, you know, flavor of the month. You know, they wanted to see that we were actually doing something about it. And I always felt that if we didn't visibly show that we were implementing their suggestions, that we would have lost them and cynicism would have taken over. And equally, we had to tell them when we weren't going to implement a particular suggestion, that they understood why that wasn't going to happen.
Gerry, thanks for your answer. I'm sorry, I'm going to have to cut you off there because we're just running out of time on the webinar, so I'm going to close it now. We've got 30 seconds left. If you maybe want to write something more up on that, or Brenda does, we can definitely issue that out with the presentation when it goes out. So thank you, everyone. Thanks for your insightful presentation, guys. Thanks for everyone for attending. Our next webinar is going to be on the 26th of April, and the theme is going to be Lessons from the US National Housing Quality Awards. So thank you again from myself, Gerry, Brendan, and on behalf of all of our CCF, CAF and LCI colleagues. We'll talk again on the 26th of April. Invitations will go out through LinkedIn and our DIS list. Have a safe rest of day and be lean.
Great. Thanks, Ellie.